Well, weeds are the worst enemy of most gardeners, but Nicole Masters reckons we can learn from them and that we should become garden detectives. Welcome to the show, Nicole. Before I start, I was forced to pull out weeds as a young child, so I really dislike them, to be perfectly honest with them.
Yeah.
But there are some good weeds.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think a lot of people have that perception that there's something wrong with them or that they're bad. And really, I think we need to think about actually what is a weed. So what's a weed?
I have no idea what a weed is. I've heard of that wandering Jew. Is that a weed?
Yeah, yep. So we've got wandering Jew here this morning. Trade scantia. Yeah. So this is the bane of many gardeners' lives. So really, when we're talking about weeds, people often say, oh, it's a plant that's in the wrong place.
Right.
Yeah. One way of looking at it as well is that they like low nutrient soils.
Okay.
They're often quick colonisers. You know, they're able to, you see these guys, they can move real fast across the soil.
Really fast.
Or things like, you think about dandelion, you know, they have heaps of seeds, so they're able to actually travel, and colonise.
So a lot of it's got to do with the soil that the weeds are sitting in.
That's right.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Which you specialise in.
That's right, yeah. So I'm a biological soil consultant. So I'll walk onto a piece of land and actually look at what is it that's growing and what is it trying to tell us.
Okay.
Yeah, and so a lot of them are really clear indicators and they're really sending quite an obvious message. Like I've got...
Did you just go and pick these out of people's gardens or your own garden?
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Yeah, well, this is Wellington Gardens.
Right.
Yeah. So I was trying to find some indicators of good, healthy soils, and I couldn't actually find any. So
is there any particular region? Because you're in the Hawke's Bay.
I'm in the Hawke's Bay, yeah.
We're down here in Wellington. Obviously, it's been a lot colder lately with the southerlies and that they're coming in. Does that have an effect on the soil?
Yeah, it definitely does. And so you'll actually see a change of what's growing as well. So that, yeah, I mean, you see that as well. It starts to warm up. We get some rain. You get flushes of different plants that are growing, coming into spring and stuff. But what I want to talk about this one is dandelion. You know, lots of people know dandelion.
Yeah, I've pulled out a few of those.
Yeah. Well, I didn't bring the whole root on this one, but these roots can grow a metre deep. Yeah. And so what that plant is actually trying to do, and this one I got from someone's carport, so they're driving over it, yeah? So it's surviving in this environment with people growing over. And its root is actually opening up that soil and trying to let in air and moisture to work. So what it also does is it's mining calcium and it brings that up through its root structure and through as, you know, it dies and it decomposes. It actually brings calcium onto that soil surface and makes that calcium available for other plants. So if we left these plants for, you know, say 100 years, they're going to change that soil to an environment that we want for our particular vegetable crops.
So if you were pulling it out, would you have to pull it right out from the very root, or would it continue to stay there?
It'll just stay there, and it'll decompose down there and start to build humus. So basically what weeds are doing is they're trying to change the soil environment to make it, basically looking at a timeline, it's succession, you know, this is time zero, we have really primitive soils, low nutrients, low humus, and as the weeds come in, they change that, so then we can have primitive grasses, then we get grasses, then we get our vegetables, then we get our shrubs, and you see that soils will change. It's a cycle. Yeah, not so cyclical as it's quite linear, but it moves backwards and forwards with disturbance. And so what humans do is we disturb a soil, so we're always pushing a soil back to a more primitive state, which suits weeds. So a lot of us, when we're gardening and farming, we're gardening for weeds because we're disturbing the soil and making it primitive. So primitive is also the low nutrients, and it's also biology, so we're looking at more bacterial-dominated soils, as opposed to like when you go into a forest situation, we have a lot of fungi. And so you've seen fungi, mushrooms, things growing like that? So those are called fungal-dominated soils. So they actually change that environment, and the plants change that environment to suit themselves. So what we're finding is people are disturbing that environment and selecting for weeds.
So what should they do?
So what could they do?
Yeah, what could they do?
So what we want to start to work with is actually getting nutrients in there. So most of these weeds, like all the weeds that we've got sitting here...
What's this one here?
That's wild mustard.
I've seen that one wandering around.
This one we find a lot. I've seen this heaps around in the Wellington area. Yeah, and so you find them kind of clambering. You think about where you see them often on, you know, sloping areas where there might not be so much humus and might not be so many nutrients.
Is that what would attract this type of weed?
So they're just kind of colonising because nature is abhorrent to the whole bare earth policy. You know, you're not going to get bare earth, and if you can leave bare earth, then things are going to grow. Yeah, so they're going to cover that soil.
And this one here, I've seen that a lot too.
Good old fennel. Yeah, so you see these in sort of wild areas beside the roads, So, they're just colonising and filling up empty spaces.
Can you eat that?
Yeah, you can eat that.
You can eat that?
And so you can wait till they get lovely big bulbs. Yeah, and then we can actually steam that up with some fish. Yeah, chop that up with fish.
Oh, definitely.
Nice,
are you a cook too?
No, not really.
Really? Who told you to cook with fish? Was that your mum?
Must have been my mum. Thanks, Mum. Yeah, so the weeds, there's a whole lot of different things we can do with weeds. This one, which is foxglove, is highly poisonous here, so this is something we wouldn't be cooking with.
Okay.
But yeah, they're all colonising the soil. So you talked about the way that we can change it.
Way that we can change the soil.
So calcium is often an indicator. So you might think, oh, but I'm on limestone soils, we've got a lot of calcium. What we find is that calcium's not actually available, and it's made available through biology. So either we have to put some calcium on, and then I'll actually put some food on. So that food might be fish, or seaweed, or a little bit of even sugar. So sugar or something like that, when you put a nutrient on, means that the biology get into that nutrient and hold on to it in the soil. Or else what calcium does is it moves quite quickly down through the soil.
I've talked about this in the past and a number of other segments about the soil content and the nutrients from the soil, and people are talking about taking vitamins, a lot more vitamins nowadays because the soil probably 30 years ago had a lot more nutrients in it. Is that true?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I'm into this, really, is that it all comes down to the soil, and it all comes to our human nutrition and what is it that we're growing. And we're growing food, and I think we've forgotten that.
So what's the difference with the organic, with people that are growing organic food? Is there, in terms of their soil content and what they're using?
Well, it depends. I mean, there's good organic growers and poor organic growers. It's like there's good conventional growers and poor. So what we're trying to do is encourage everyone to lift their game, really, and how is it we can get nutrition in, and reducing chemical burdens, you know, reducing the chemicals that we require. So if you've got something like weeds, instead of using a herbicide, how is it we can change that soil environment? And insects and disease are often indicators of what's nutritionally not happening in my plant. Just like, you know, if we're a bit run down, you're more likely to get a cold or more likely to get an infection, say a skin infection. It's the same with the plant. So we're really looking at the nutrients just aren't in the plant and in our food like they should be. And they've actually looked at that and since sort of the 1940s, you know, we really went into the chemical paradigm. You're looking at a reduction of vitamins of up to 70% in some of our plants and some of our food.
Was it better in the 60s? I'm just saying that because that's when I was born. Hey, Nicole, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Some great advice for people at home, and I've got a lot more respect for weeds now and why they're there and why they're so relevant or prevalent in our gardens.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks. Great.
Gosh, that was so interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah, that reduction in the vitamins in our food because of all the chemicals.